Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech protected.
Thank you for watching another episode of Welcome Keene. My name is Egis Sosimo. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your support. Thank you for watching us. Today I invited to our studio a very special guest, a guest who knows almost everything about our local history, Jenna Carroll, Director of Historical Society of Cheshire County, who coordinates more than 150 public programs each year. As an educator, she performs stories about collective past, builds connections with the present, makes the work of academics and scholars available to the community. She brings to life realities of diminished groups left out of the mainstream history. She's also the adjunct at the Antioch University of New Hampshire, where she teaches social studies. She's the 2019 recipient of the Keene State College's President's Community Partner Award, and she's also the recipient of the Keene Sentinel's Extraordinary Woman of the Monadnock region. Jenna, thank you so much for coming to our studio. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
Good.
Are you enjoying the weather today?
No, not at all.
Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate you taking time and from your busy schedule and coming to the studio and willing to answer my questions.
Of course.
To start our conversation, could you please share a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I was raised in New Hampshire. And so I've been able to build a career trying very hard to be able to stay in New Hampshire. So I grew up on the Seacoast region and moved away for a little bit. But once I got married and had kids, it was, I need back in my home state. And so I was able to come back here because this is where I wanted to raise a family. And so now I'm in a new section of the state, and it's wonderful. Well, it's a great place to be.
Keene is such a cute and beautiful place to have a family, right?
Yeah.
It's really wonderful. Did you have, could you please tell us a little bit about your educational background? Like how did you,
Yeah, so I went to the University of New Hampshire for college. I went into school thinking I was going to major in math. I really liked algebra. Yeah, and then I realized I wasn't really good at math. So I felt a little lost for a while there. And then I ended up taking a course on early American history. And I just sort of got sucked into this idea of everyday lives of people before me and decided, this is what I want to do. I want to learn more. I don't want to stop learning after I graduate. And so I majored in American history, but then I really got interested in the changing role of women in society over time. And so I double majored, partly because I just didn't want to graduate yet and deal with the real world.
You like learning.
I didn't want a real job. But taking extra courses so that I can double major in women's history. So by the time I graduated, it was the 90s, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to teach. What do you do with a history degree? And that's what people kept saying to me. Why are you majoring in history? What are you going to do with that? But I knew that I loved it, and I ended up with this opportunity. There was a new museum forming in Exeter, New Hampshire, and it happens to be where the Declaration of Independence was read in New Hampshire to the citizens. And so I thought, this is, I want to try to work here. And I went and helped the American Independence Museum and helped them do research. And so it was all the behind the scenes stuff. And I fell in love with museums and knew okay, this is what I want. So I went to grad school for history museum administration.
This is very inspiring story.
Yeah.
Right? This is awesome. So then you ended up in Keene and you got the position of the Director of Education at the Historical Society of Cheshire County. And so could you please tell us a little bit briefly, what is Historical Society in Keene? And what's its mission?
Yeah, so the Historical Society of Cheshire County, we're a nonprofit organization, and we're the only county museum in New Hampshire. So it's our mission to collect the history of 23 towns that make up Cheshire County, and then to preserve what we've collected and use what we've collected then to share stories, real stories about anything in the entire history or past of this region in Southwest New Hampshire. So it's a lot of, as stuff comes in, it's like the mail. Things are arriving every day, new stories, new histories.
Exactly.
And,
history never ends.
It doesn't end.
Infinity.
And, so there's a lot of trying to figure out what's the next story, or whose story haven't we told yet. And it's a lot of discovery, which I think is the exciting
So you
part.
have been a director for a decade, and I think it's a really cool job. It's very passionate, and it's very inspiring and very educational. What are your responsibilities?
Yeah, well, I should say my background is I was an executive director. I've been in the field for almost 30 years, and this is maybe the 13th museum I've worked in.
Oh my gosh.
So, long career. But every place is a new opportunity, right? So I had spent a lot of time as an executive director and as a curator, just working with artifacts. And then once I had my children, I thought, I want them to be able to grow up with me and do stuff with me in a museum setting. And so that opportunity came with this job, and that's why we moved to New Hampshire. So I'm the director of education, which means I'm doing anything from maybe a preschool program to teaching classes for older adults and exhibitions and doing research for programs. And we have a lot of college interns, high school interns, and volunteers that we're helping bring into the loop of helping to create history with us. So there's a lot of initiatives, and you mentioned we do 150 programs a year. Right. And that's not on purpose. It's, we plan maybe 70, but Keene is such a vibrant community, and people love to collaborate and have ideas to share, and we never want to miss an opportunity. So we start with planning about 70 programs in a year, and we end the year exhausted. Because there's so many opportunities to collaborate with others in this, and it's wonderful. I haven't
also
seen
people
this
want to
elsewhere.
learn, right?
Yeah,
like there's a big need for learning, for being educated, like getting to know the history, what's going on. Like there's so many different events, and people are willing to come and like get to know things. It's really wonderful.
So at this point, I've been there 10 years, but we're coming up on our 100th anniversary as an organization.
That's
so
exciting. 2027
is our 100th anniversary, and when we look at how our organization has evolved, or how people have engaged with history and how that's changed so much over time, there's growing opportunity for connecting. We see ourselves now as a cultural hub, where a safe space for people to come and maybe make connections to the past, but also just to make connections to each other in today's community. Because the thing's so virtual, isn't it lovely to have occasions where you bring people together and you're finding connections
absolutely.
together.
Connections, and also get educated at the same time. I think it's very important. What are the biggest challenges?
Oh, that there's a lot of collaborations. There's always more to do. History doesn't stop.
Right.
Like the mail, it just keeps coming. So it's hard to decide, like, what are we going to keep and what do we not keep? So that's one of the big challenges for the work that we do. When you think about it, like I remember reading the National Archive, which collects the entire country's history, they only keep about 5% of what comes in. Oh. And you have to realize, like, we're making decisions about what we're going to preserve about our past. So we have to take that very seriously and make sure that we're being as inclusive as possible in those stories that we share. So that's a challenge. A challenge is that more people are interested in history. It's become part of our popular culture to know more, want to know more. How many TV shows are there, for instance, about learning about your own past or the history of the pencil, whatever.
Right,
There's so many things you can learn about. So people come in with this expectation that, like, where's the diary of my ancestor? And like, did they keep a diary? Right. And so the expectation of that people want to know, but what is it that's been preserved, and how could we do that safely where we're keeping things and providing access to those who are interested? So there's a lot of challenges in that way. And I think another challenge is in our culture, in our country, I see it different from other countries where it's really on the organizations to fund themselves, and members fund us. So we are supported by membership, and every little town has a historical society in need of that support. Where other countries, it's, might be government run or state run or county run. And so there's financial challenges always. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to ask you, what is the most rewarding, the most rewarding aspects of your job, and how does it affect your professional and personal life?
Yeah, I think the most rewarding thing is when you see someone suddenly connect with what it is that you're trying to teach them, right? So for instance, like what is it that we want out of this? We want people to connect to the past. We want people to find their own place in the history, because we're all a part of what's happening now and what's to come. So for instance, we could do a potluck event and have two people connect to each other. We had this event where everybody brought a dish from their country of origin. And as we're leaving, I was asking this elderly woman, what did you think? And she was Finnish. Her ancestry is Finnish, and her family's been here for a long time. And she said, I never thought that would happen. And I said, what? She said, I never thought I'd connect with somebody else who wasn't Finnish. And they had talked about yogurt. And it's such a tiny little thing, right? That how many cultures
that's
are
huge
there?
Thing. It's a
right?
tiny thing.
That there's these
huge.
stories of
yes.
sharing. And
yes.
Something as mundane as yogurt could bring two people together. And it happens that the woman that she connected with is a friend of ours, Lisa, who's has a Syrian background. And so here you had these two people from two diverse backgrounds suddenly connect over yogurt.
And I have a testimony about it as well, and I think it's also very rewarding. You remember when we came to watch the exhibit about the history of immigration in Cheshire County, and I found an ancestor. I found the first immigrant in Walpole, New Hampshire, was born in the same village that my father was born 100 years ago. It was unbelievable that I found somebody on the other side of the ward that is from the same village. It was absolutely mind-blowing.
So your face at that moment it was the epiphany that what we're looking for. And then when you say what's the thing that keeps us going, it's seeing that moment where you were like, that's my village.
That's my home.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. I mean, that's for your heart. It's like warming your heart.
And we get to do that with children too. We do a lot of youth programming. So we do history camps with kids where they're history detective camps where kids are detectives and they're analyzing real crime that happened in the 1860s in Keene.
Oh, that is really cool.
And so over the course of the week, they're discovering who did it kind of stuff. And they connect with us so much that the last time we did it, we had to call some parents and say, it's not real, it's a summer camp, don't worry. Because the kids are so invested in the outcome. And another time, we brought a diary of an 18-year-old girl into a high school class at Keene High School. And we had worked with the teachers to create lessons to help teach the students then not only how to read it, because it's in cursive. And you think about the fact that kids learn cursive in 3rd grade. Right. And so we had to reteach cursive. And then they worked in pairs, and they had 2-3 pages each of this diary that they had to transcribe and type out. So working together, they had to figure out what it says, and it was like a puzzle. And then they had to do a paper on what is it that taught them, because this diary was from 1850. So for instance, this girl's talking about her and her friends getting to watch the cars go by, and they'd sit all day and watch the cars go by. She's talking about train cars because the train had just arrived in Keene, and this was like the big thing for teenagers to do. And so these kids got so invested. They knew all her friends, her siblings, and they're gossiping. And in the end, I came back to the class. They asked to transcribe the whole diary because they got as extra credit. They were so excited. And I went back because they wanted to know what happened to this girl. So she wrote for 1 year, and I said, well, she stopped writing because she got married. But she died in childbirth. Oh. And like a year later, she was like 19, 20 years old. And everybody just gasped because they knew her.
Right.
And
they felt like it was part of their life.
Yes.
Right.
And somebody started crying. And so, not that we want to have people cry, but but there was another moment where these students were really engaged and had empathy for something that happened in 1850. And how often are you, I mean, I have kids who don't have empathy for what happened yesterday to somebody.
Right. No, I totally understand.
So those are the kinds of things that I would say.
And they also grow interest in history, right? Like they will keep
Yes.
it forever. It's not like watching their reality show. It's like something that's really actually meaningful and important.
And it is important. I think it's important for the community itself to know its local history. And there's studies that have been done in Amsterdam that students who learn their local history and then can see it in their community, and I think this is true for anyone, become more involved in their community. They feel more at home in
Right.
place. They volunteer more as they age, and they become more involved
And
in
they
the
also know
community.
why things are the way they
Yes.
are. They know
Yeah.
why it comes, where it comes from. Like when you know why, what that building means, right, or what that
Right.
museum means. Like
Right.
it's
There's
very
a context.
exactly, it's
Yeah.
very important. They feel connected to the history. They know why things work the way they work, and also why downtown looks the way it looks, right?
That's
like
right.
all that stuff. That I think it's very important.
Yes.
But I have a question about the immigration because,
Yeah,
like I that's what I do. That's what I love. Could you please tell us a little bit about the immigration? Like when the first immigrants, where did they come to town?
Well,
how everything started?
I think it's important just to acknowledge or to start by saying that the history that we have here in Southwest New Hampshire, we have to remember that we're on the ancestral homeland of the Abenaki people called Indakina, and so there's at least 12,600 years, at least, of history of people moving in and out of this region. So.
Right.
So when you say when the first immigrant was, it's really hard to answer that question. But if we talk about, ethno-European history, you start to see people moving up from the seacoast region up the Connecticut River. So people started to move out west and then up from Connecticut and Massachusetts up into this area in about the 1730s. And then, there's immigration involved in that, and they're bringing with them some of the culture from the places that they've been, but there's also people moving into the area, such as Africans and African Americans who are moving into the area as well. So there's a whole history there that we're just beginning to research right now and learn more about. And then there's just a very early history of people just moving into the area because of forces outside. The first big group to move into New Hampshire, the Irish. And as early as the 1850s, you start to see the New Hampshire legislature arguing laws about wanting to limit the right to vote for some people because this fear that the Pope is going to decide, the Catholic Pope is going to decide our elections.
Right.
And so you start to see, a lot of times the way you can track immigration history is by looking at the laws, and so, and how that's evolving, or the arguments in a newspaper about these kinds of things, like who has the right to vote, who has a say in your
What was the
community.
main reason they moved here? Do you think it was jobs?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about why anybody moves anywhere, right?
Right.
There's jobs and better opportunity for yourself or for your family and your descendants.
Right.
There's opportunities for economic growth,
Right.
but also leaving some difficulties. So in the case of my ancestors, the Irish, it's potato famine is what we talk about.
Right.
That
Right.
there was hardship and starvation where somebody's from, and that these are things that are happening all over the world
Right.
today, and reasons why people leave is any hardship that gets to be too much, you
Correct.
need to consider moving, even if it's a place that you absolutely love and
And
you
it's
don't
funny,
want to
we're
move.
like 100 years later and nothing changed, right?
Right,
Like the reasons
that's
are
right.
exactly the same.
Right, and it's even feels like it's exacerbated. Like
Right.
there's more reasons around the world why there's these mass migrations. But it's part of our entire human history. So to have these things happen. So I was curious recently about, we study the English immigrants who come in, and then the Scottish and the French Canadians and the Irish. And I was like, well, what about like Asian populations, for instance? So, you can look at with farming and then heading into industries in the late 19th century, more people coming to work in mills. So the Polish population explodes in this area with the mills, especially in Winchester and other areas like that, and in Walpole. But I haven't heard much in New Hampshire history about Asian populations, so I was really curious about that too.
Yeah, that is a good point.
And a lot of that history is mid-20th century or later, and it's really hard to research that time period because those documents, we use primary sources, aren't readily accessible. Some of that stuff is still private or not available, and so it's sometimes much easier to research 100 years or 200 years ago than it is more recent. But one of the things I found really fascinating recently are the Chinese coming into the area. So we see Chinese immigrants moving into Southwest New Hampshire in the mid-19th century, which is very early to me, I think.
That is early.
And a lot of times it's single men or groups of single men moving together and establishing Chinese laundries. One of the only jobs that could get opened up to
I would think the
an
Chinese
immigrant.
restaurants, but it's Chinese laundries.
No, yeah. So you go with the types of jobs that, are needed in that community or that So these opportunities are arising in this area for Chinese laundries. So why are these single men, right? And some of these men are married. And so there's connections to Boston, there's connections to California that we're seeing bringing people here. Mm-hmm. And what we're finding is some of the earliest immigration laws that we have in our country relate to Asian Americans coming here, this fear that the Chinese are going to take our jobs. And so once the railroads are built and the Chinese who came here to help with that are looking for work elsewhere, then there are immigration laws that are restricting that. So we are seeing that in our own communities here, that these are men who could not go home to see their families because they wouldn't be allowed back, or couldn't bring their families here because there were laws against bringing families here because then they would stay.
Right.
And so there's a pattern of that happening locally. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that, sometimes you think, oh, history happened somewhere else.
No.
I'm amazed when we can see this on a small scale, something that was happening across the country, because those are very important teaching moments. That it didn't happen somewhere else. It happened here too. Yeah.
Right, that's the history, right?
Yeah,
History is
yeah.
happening right here, right in this moment. I want to ask you about what is Historical Society doing regarding diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about this in recent years. I had to say, like, when I started, I have a quick story.
Mm-hmm.
I started, I thought, okay, I'm going to work in museums. I love history. I'm going to major in history. And I thought early American history fascinated me. And the first day, the teacher said, raise your hand if you can say that your ancestors came here then. It's the first moment, I was in my early 20s. I know I'm Irish Italian.
Right.
But it was the first moment that I was like, why am I going to major in early American history? My people didn't come until the late 1800s. Like, it didn't dawn on me that, oh, that's somebody else's history, but I had thought of it as mine. Mm-hmm. And so it got me thinking, how come I don't see myself represented in my ancestry and my culture? And I got into the museum field thinking, I want to flip things around. Like, I want to add new stories and diversify the stories that we are preserving and sharing. So most of my career has been spent working with various immigrant groups, and getting stories of women and everyday working people, hardship and struggle and poverty, all of these kinds of things.
No, I personally participated in at least 3 or 4 events that you guys organize, and there was for immigrants.
Yes.
There was the Holi Festival, right? There was the exhibit about the history of the immigration. There was International Women's Day, right? There was a Here and Now and then.
Here,
There was
here
another
now.
one.
Yeah, we've
Here
done
Now.
it. Yeah.
There was another wonderful. So you guys step out and you really try to be inclusive of every group.
Because we know that everyone has a story, and people need the opportunity to connect their life story, like you did, to the past.
Right.
And so we do a lot of contemporary things, knowing that what we really want is for people to start to see themselves as part of a timeline in our community.
And it's also wonderful, do something right now. Maybe my kids will watch that.
Right.
Watch the video and they see the picture or something and it's part of the history. And I think that's really the most wonderful thing about it.
So I think it's not just us doing or hosting these programs. In the last few years, what we're trying to do more is that it's not enough for us to provide a space to do these things and say, okay, now come everybody that's, not like the average, all more diverse people come. We want people to be a part of the programs we create, be a part of researching the history, so that we're involving more of the diverse community that we have here in the decisions that we're making about what we're going to do. And so to be a part of the International Festival Committee and help be part of that is exactly in line with what it is that we'd like to do. When we plan something like a Holi Festival, which it's with the Keene India Association, because it's not our job to do. It's something that we need to be working together.
And that's also new history.
That's right.
Right? You create new history like that. It's different than 100 years ago. That's the new history, and that's you want to be part of it, and you want to feel connected with that because you're creating something new. And maybe, as I said, 20 years later, 50 years later, somebody see the pictures from festival or Holi Festival, International Festival.
Yeah, where we did a great Finnish bread bake-off for
Exactly.
years, and
Exactly.
that's with the Finnish community. So those are the things that we're trying to do more of, is looking internally about who's making these decisions about the programs we do, and how can we bring in more diverse people to help us with that.
Yes. I really love that approach. I think it's really meaningful and has a big potential. So could you please tell us, before we end our show, where Historical Society is located and what are the hours of operation?
Oh, sure. So the Historical Society of Cheshire County is located at 246 Main Street. So we're right across from Keene State Campus. That's our main headquarters and where we do programs and exhibits. And so we're open Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, 9 to 4. Wednesdays we are open till 8 o'clock. So if anyone has to work, there's no excuse. Come in. We're open from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Wednesdays. And then we try to open on weekends as well. So the first and third Saturday of every month we're open. So people can come in and research their ancestry, or see an exhibit, or
what's a
engage
current
with
exhibit
us.
that we can go and see?
Right now we have an exhibit called Signs of the Times, and we have signs from all eras, so directional signs, restaurant signs. Like it's really interesting, and it's really beautiful to see the artistry and signage and how that's changed over time. So that's our current exhibit.
Awesome. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thank
coming
you.
to the
Thank
studio.
you.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge, and I encourage and invite everybody to go to Historical Society, see the exhibit, talk to people, do some research. You really feel connected with the history. It's a really wonderful place to go and explore. Thank you so much. By the way, congratulations to the whole team of the Historical Society for winning Ken Ju Nonprofit of the Year Award at the Greater Monadnock Collaborative's annual gala just last week. Thank you so much.
You.
And Jenna is also an extraordinary woman. She always will be. She's wonderful. She connects with the community. Thank you so much. My name is Egis Sosimo, and I will see you in 2 weeks.